Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
For Good. For Good is a song from Wicked. You're familiar with the musical Wicked. It's the story of Elphaba and Glinda, the two witches from Oz, and their backstory, the whole backstory about the Wizard of Oz and what really happened, right? What was going on. I thought of this song to share tonight for this topic, Death is My Advisor, because it seemed like unusual at the time, that I had the opportunity to sing this song with a friend and mentor of mine, Britt Hall, at the memorial service for Rosemary Fillmore Ray, who is the granddaughter of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And it just seemed like such a perfect song on the topic of death and endings, and just how we can let go of so much of that day-to-day stuff that we hold on to, and just really see what good there was in a relationship, in a situation, and events in our lives. I believe that that is part of the dying experience at the end of our life, where we really shed a lot of that old stuff that we don't need to take with us when we let go of this earth suit, and we remember the good, and remember the good that we've done, the good that was done for us. So what if, rather than feeling resistance to the tests of life, that stuff that just keeps coming up, and oh, there it is again, or why do I have to deal with that, that you look forward to them? What if we looked forward to them? What would that be like, to look forward? To see it as a compassionate alarm clock, the situation, saying, there's another way. There's another way you could see this. Is there another way that you could face the big issue in your life? How can this situation allow you to be changed for good? This practice that we're discussing tonight, it is the 8th practice from Living Originally, Robert Brummett's book, that we've been covering over the last several weeks. So this practice is called Death is My Advisor, and it's not meant to be morbid. It's meant to recognize that our mortality can be used as a gift and a practice. So what is this practice? What is the practice? And Robert Brummett shares with us that the essence of the practice is wrapped up in the expression of a story that he discovered of Carlos Castaneda, a young graduate student who went to Mexico in the 60s. He was actually doing research on psychedelic drugs, and he came to meet this sorcerer. That was his graduate research. He came to meet this native Yaqui sorcerer named Don Juan Matus, who became his mentor. And this is what Don Juan said to Carlos in this time as his mentor about this topic. Death is our eternal companion. It is always at our left, at an arm's length. It has always been watching you. It always will until the day it taps you. And these words penetrated deep into Carlos's body, giving him a feeling of nausea. And Don Juan continued, the thing to do when you're impatient is to turn to your left and ask advice from your death. An immense amount of pettiness is dropped. If you catch a glimpse of it, or if you just have the feeling that your companion is there watching you, that death, companion of death. And Carlos plunged into a deep feeling of terror. And Don Juan continued. He said this, "Death is the only wise advisor we have. Whenever you feel that everything is going wrong and you're about to be annihilated, turn to your death and ask if that is so. Your death will tell you that you're wrong, that nothing really matters outside of its touch." And these words that Don Juan shared with him, they shook Carlos to the very core of his being, hearing this. And that's what happens when we face our death. And perhaps you had some experience of that during the meditation tonight as we reflected on an image of our death or on some thoughts around our legacy and our work on this planet in light of the potential end that we all have, the end to our life. We've been more comfortable as a culture making death impersonal. We see death all the time, but usually we see it in movies and TV, and it just seems like there's just the violence and the blood and everything, especially certain filmmakers who just really get into the gore of it, right? And we made it impersonal. According to one study, the average American child sees at least 8,000 murders on TV and many more in movies and in video games before they even graduate from elementary school. 8,000. Yeah. So in that experience, death seems to happen. It's always happening, but it's happening to others. It's not personal. Right? It's out there, it's on the screen. And even when we make death personal, have you noticed that we don't like to say the D word? We'll say somebody's made their transition, or someone's gone to be with the Lord, they've gone to a better place, they've passed on. When I was in ministerial school, one of the things that our service, our instructor in our sacred service class taught us was that in your memorial service you need to say the name of the person, and that they have died. He thought it was very important that you say the word death because of this very thing, that the people who are there, the friends and the family, they need to hear it so that they can come to accept the reality of it, that this person, in fact, is not going to get up and start walking around or show up, answer the phone, all that kind of thing, that was something that he felt was important for us to impart, not over and over again, but just to make sure we included that word in there so we weren't bypassing it. We weren't kind of sugarcoating it, really allowing the gravitas of the situation to take hold and allowing people to grieve. It's funny in our culture, too, that even after death, we pay someone we don't know, if you're having an open casket, to dress the body up, to embalm it, and to make them look like they're going out to a party. And they're going for a night out. So that's another way that we put off that experience of death by letting ourselves experience the person again as if they looked like they were still alive. This practice of death as my advisor, it's not only meant for allowing death to be personal, but also to be like a companion, to consult with and to run things by in our lives. We can connect with that as a supportive and a positive energy. Last week, Reverend Karen talked about dancing with chaos, and death is the ultimate form of chaos. It is the greatest unknown that we've had people who have had near-death experiences, but they have not actually died, right? They died, they came back, right? They came back so they can tell us some of what that journey is. But we don't really know beyond that, beyond the going into the light of different ways that it's been expressed, for sure. We may have heard about it and that kind of thing, but still, it's that unknown of what's next. It's the greatest of the unknowns. And because it's the ultimate unknown, it's our deepest avoidance as humans. We really want to avoid it. Why do we avoid it? Well, physical death is the most powerful symbol of leaving everything that we've grown to build up for ourselves in our lives, right? And anything that we call me, mine, all of our stuff, right? Our possessions, our relationships, our children, our parents, all of that. To face death is to face the end of our ego identification. Ego only exists in time and space and form. Okay, it's a relative realm in metaphysical terms. It's relative realm only. It's not absolute realm, right? It's not an ultimate experience. It's a limited time experience for the use of this body in this time. We have this ego, and the ego only exists in relationship to something else. So one way that we can make the ego seem to disappear, according to Robert Brumman and this work, is this practice of accepting and facing our own death. So that is working with releasing some of that ego identification that can keep us from fully expressing our original nature, our divine nature, our true nature, because we get caught up in that ego identification of a certain persona, a certain way of being. The Bhagavad Gita says this: of all the world's wonders, what is the most wonderful? That no man, though he sees others dying all around him, believes that he himself will die. So we buy into this illusion that we'll live forever somehow. Somehow I'll be the one to live forever. I know Charles Fillmore did try. He tried to live as long as he possibly could, and he made it into his 94th year, so he did really well on that. We can waste a lot of time in that illusion of living forever, rather than really recognizing our limited time on this planet and utilizing that to the fullest. To the ego, death is the ultimate enemy, okay? To the soul, though, the soul that's seeking freedom, which is why I believe we're drawn to this unity path together, where we have a soul that is seeking some freedom, right? Some greater awareness, some greater experience, that death is our ultimate advisor. And it's only when we allow the ego to release that identification, to be annihilated, as Robert Brumman says, that we begin to see much more of our true nature, that we are much more than the ego. We are that which is beyond the ego. And as long as we're alive, as long as we're conscious, the ego will not go away. Okay, we will always have the ego, so no fear there to work with this. You won't lose your ego. You won't just melt into oneness and no longer know who you are. That kind of, I don't know, whatever idea you might have that could be completely losing the ego. You won't lose it. What we're working to do is to lose our exclusive identification with the ego as this limited person in this time and space, right? We're expanding ourselves. The ego is meant to serve us as the expression of our essential nature. So we can use the ego as a vehicle to fully express ourselves, our true nature, more into the world. And so that's its purpose, and that's how we can use it, really, as a servant to spirit. In Buddhism, this practice is called Maransati, okay? Death awareness is the translation of that word. And it encourages us to use the fact of our death to illuminate, to enrich our life. The Buddha told it this way in this parable. A man is traveling across a field and he encounters a tiger, a fierce tiger, so he flees, he runs, the tiger chases after him, and he takes him to the edge of a cliff. So coming to the edge of this cliff, the man catches hold of the root of a wild vine, and he swings himself down over the edge. And the tiger sniffs at him, he tries to get at him, and the man is trembling. And the man looks around to where he could go, and far below him, there's another tiger trying to eat him from below. So he's really stuck, and only the vine is sustaining him. Then 2 mice, one white and one black, little by little start to gnaw away at his vine. Okay, so we know what's coming here, I think. The man looks and he sees this luscious strawberry right before him off the side of this precipice, right? And grasping the vine with one hand, he reaches over, he grabs the strawberry, and he takes a bite. Delicious. How sweet it tasted. Noticing the sweetness in the presence of fear and the imminent approach of death. So if you knew your death was imminent, how would you enjoy today? How would you enjoy this moment? There is a story that Robert Brummett tells in the book that if you get a chance to read it, you might want to check it out, about how he and a group of 30 friends did this experiment where they decided to live a whole year planning a date that they would do their memorial. So a year later, they were going to do a memorial, and as if that was their death date. So they had one more year to live, and they would meet regularly, and they would talk about they made bucket lists and how they were preparing, and they actually did the memorial. And he said that through this process, that he brightened up, he lived his life more fully, he really noticed little things in the moment, in the day-to-day, that even though he did this some, I think, 1998 was the year he said he did it with his friends, so quite some time ago, so his death was not imminent at that time. It allowed him to live in a fresh way, in a new way. So this is how we can use death as our advisor. So when you're deciding whether or not to do something, one question you can ask yourself is, would I want to put that in my obituary? Would I want to see that in print? I've used death as my advisor before, and one of the ways that I used it, interestingly enough, was when I decided to do Urinetown, the musical. And it was something that came up, not something that was part of my normal routine as a minister, and I thought, that would be fun. I want to make sure I get that done before I die. I'd like to meet, and it was just so special to get to meet Catherine and the wonderful cast, and to have that experience, and to see also how that process really helped me to discern how I could make choices that were not necessarily choices that were the right choice for appearances or what have you, right, that my mind might conjure up as reasons to do things, but something that I wanted to follow my heart and felt was important to include in my life. So consider, as you're using death as your advisor, what legacy do you want to leave in the world? What legacy are you leaving by how you're showing up and what you're doing, and is there anything you'd want to shift to leave more of a legacy of love and generosity and peace and kindness, service? I'm going to end my message tonight with this poem that I just love. It's a fun poem, and it's by Mary Oliver. It's called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Does everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Namaste.
Lovely finale. That was a great tribute to Mary Oliver, who has passed on, actually, but she lives on, and her legacy of the amazing way that she looked at the world, and she shared it with us, so thank you. This has really been great. I really love what you've shared, and also the meditation. I just wanted to kind of share what the form was of death. I hadn't actually. I've always thought of death as being in some things that I've read from Rachel Naomi Raymond, who worked with people who were terminally diagnosed and were moving towards the end of their life, and there's just a lot of rich stories, and one of them is about how death is kind of like behind them, and they just keep turning around thinking it's just like right there, and but not in a creepy weird way, because that sounded creepy weird, but it really is kind of like there's something that's always been here, but I've always kind of known it, but in the back of your mind you kind of knew it, but now you really kind of saw it, and but didn't describe it. And so in this meditation, for me, I tried to follow the directions, and death appeared to me just blackness, just really darkness, but yet intelligent, and was conversant and at peace, and not malevolent or anything, and I felt a little cool. I felt a little coolish temperature, and then I think you asked us to ask some sort of question, and somehow I think I asked the question, what will happen, when you come for me, or whatever, when I go to you, and sort of he sort of said it, but also demonstrated it, and opened a big void, opened his mouth. He says, I will swallow you, and swallowed me up, and I was birthed into the cosmos, of just stars. And then I said, but where's the light? They tell you you're going to go to the light. And he said, well, look down at yourself. You're bringing the light. And so I thought, yeah, does that really happen, though? I mean, No, but I really thought it was so unexpected and sweet, and I'm going to play with that a little bit more. So that was my experience. What was yours, David?
Well, I really appreciate that you're speaking of, and the meditation was speaking of death as metaphor, as a character, as a guest, and you can dialogue with it. And so I get the value of that. It's really interesting, we think of death as a thing, we attribute it qualities, when actually it's not life. You know, and it doesn't surprise me at all you saying how we see death all around us, and we know it's going to happen to everybody, except of course us, right? Because earlier this year, I don't know what I could attribute it to, but there was a point where sort of a combination of what I was reading and what I heard on the radio and just my own meditation, where it's going to sound silly and sophomoric just to state it so plainly, but I was experiencing it as an epiphany that our human condition is we're incapable of imagining not life. So that's why we have all this conversation about afterlife, and we attribute qualities to death, and we just don't have the capacity to imagine non-existence. We don't at all, and so I was riveted by that and noticed then how quickly I had to snap out of it and come into making stuff up again. That was more comforting. You know, and then this week I heard Jane Goodall in an interview, and she's 87 years old, right? And so the interviewer said, so what are you looking forward to next? I mean, here's one of the greatest scientists of our generation. And she said, death. And the interviewer was a little bit perplexed by the response, and she said, yeah, I mean, there's the real possibility that there's nothing after life. You know, that death just ends life, and okay, that's fine. If that's what happens, then okay. But as the next adventure, if there is something after death, then I want it. I want to experience that. I thought that was pretty remarkable to hear her say that. And there's a lot to be said on this topic of death. I have a little bit more to offer about expectancy, but I'll listen.
Have either of you seen the show The Good Place?
Yes.
So you've seen it. Oh, it's so great. So they explore the idea of what the afterlife is like, and that there's a bad place, a good place, and a medium place, and it's fun. I really like what they ended up uncovering as not only the good place, but also what would happen after the good place. It's really interesting too. So I don't want to spoil it for anyone.
Well, earlier you were also saying about how would this very day I heard someone talking that there is a moment that it's the last time you put your child to bed. There is a last time that you do the various things in your life, but we don't know when that is. And if you knew that this was going to be your last meal, or your last time to put up a Christmas tree, or your last time to do these things, then you would bring to it such preciousness, such value, such presence of mind. And we don't know when that is. So we may as well live every moment as if that's what's going to happen. Yeah. It's a good concept, right? And then I'm also reminded of the whole business of expectancy. Earlier, today is Tanya's birthday. Happy birthday, Tanya, if she's watching. And she shared it with the staff yesterday that she was just enjoying living in the expectancy. And then Michael reminded us that we're in the period of Advent. And what Advent is, it means anticipation. And so I don't want to anticipate death, but on the other hand, that's our lesson tonight, is to use it as our teacher and to ponder, well, what is in this gap of where I am now and not now? And that I have actually gotten some value out of living in this state of expectancy as an end game in and of itself. That this holding capacity for anticipating something. It's really a beautiful place to be.
Yeah. He suggests the practice of dialoguing with death. You could either put death in a chair and talk to death and then switch places and be death and give answers, or you could journal. And I did the journaling back and forth, and It's just amazing what kind of things just show up as you imagine that advisor there of the end of your life. And I also happened to recently read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on the end of life, and how fascinating it was that she had comforting about that there were so many people who shared positive experiences, and it just seemed like every near-death experience that she encountered and studied was all something positive that came through.
Right, exactly. I've been long interested in studying near-death experiences from ministerial school, actually, and largely just thinking that if so much experience has happened, because I only heard of like 1 or 2 rare cases or whatever. This is in the early 90s, and I hadn't heard about all of the books that were written or the stories that were put together or studied. And so I made it my business then to start taking a look at that, because I really wanted to be able to see the through thread, to see for myself, what is this perception? What is this teaching us? And I like what you said. We talk about near-death experiences as though they're certifiable, and this is what we're told. But the truth is, they came back. So like, there's some, most people don't come back. So what's on the other side? What's going all the way? And what is that like? I'm very optimistic. I really believe there's life after this experience. I think there's been life. I think I'm living an eternal life, and I think I'll have consciousness with that. That's just my bias, and I'm kind of also resigned to. It's out of my control if I'm wrong. If it turns out the lights just go out. Boop. And boop, gone. It's like, what are you going to do about it? It's like there was nothing. I don't want to regret anything. And the deal is that even though I think there is life going on, I don't think this is a wasted life, or that I can, that I want to waste this life. I know then, therefore, how precious this life is, because it is so short, because it has a beginning and an end. And even if my spirit or my soul is continuing on and stringing these, life experiences together in some crazy way, that still this one matters, and it matters now. And this is my chance. I don't know what, to do what. I need to tap in, and I need to be sure that I'm doing whatever I thought was such a good idea, to get into this, flesh suit and be here, be here now. And so in doing this and being this, it makes it much more precious, don't you think? And it just makes you so much more engaged when you think of it, which is what I love about what you shared about Robert's experiment, I guess his experiment, of pretending his life was coming to an end at a particular date, and seeing what a difference that made in anticipation of that. I was going to say one other thing about that, but I will come back to it. I guess I'll stop, because I want to hear what else is cooking.
Well, the ghost of Christmas past certainly was effective for Scrooge, sort of imagining your life in retrospect. That's always a really useful exercise at various times in our life. Reflect on what would we be saying to ourselves in our final days. Like, is this really what you wanted to do with your life? It's a valid question to ask anytime.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing I was going to say is the advantage of personifying death in some way, or anthropomorphizing, or just metaphoricizing it, or whatever you're doing, whatever you do to make it a thing, it has the advantage, really, of giving perspective, because I know now, as a grandmother, I know now, at this stage of my life, the arc of life, and going back into remembering how nervous I always was about raising my children, and every little thing that they did that was, something unexpected or something they shouldn't be doing, or I didn't want them to do, or whatever, and I was just fearful that they were just going to spin out of control and go, down a path that I couldn't pull them back onto, that everything mattered so much. It was such a big deal. And of course now as a grandmother, I go, they do that for a while. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, probably they won't. I don't know, they might, but they probably won't. They'll probably just come back, because after all, that's not what you're doing, right? So, they're pretty much going to come back to whatever you're doing, And just, I have a much more, I got a bigger arc, of life. And I think that's the advantage death has for us. There is a part of us that knows that wisdom of what we're here for, and what to worry about and what not to worry about, what matters and what doesn't matter. And I think checking in with that part is, whatever you want to call it, or however it is that you do that. The journaling, I've done that. It's so powerful, and it's so crazy that you think it's coming out of you, but immediately that you would never have thought of that. You would never have said that. And that, even just the way it says it, is different than the way I speak. So, and it's not, I don't know, it's just very cool. So it's a cool part that you're tapping into, that is already a part of you, and that will give you that wisdom and that advice that, what, things are okay. You're going to be all right. You already are all right. It's all going to work out.
I'd love to share my image that came to me, not while I was leading the meditation, but when I did it prior, that the image that I got was this black charred heart that had a fire in front of it. And so what I felt from it was like, all that stuff that drives me crazy, it's all going in there in the end. It's all burning up and transforming back into love. It's all returning to love. So that's what that death experience is, or is going to be, or what it can be for me when I use it. And I recognize that there's a lot more stuff I could let go of and live more fully.
Oh, I stepped on my cord. I love that. I love that so much. Do a card of that.
I was thinking of that too. A soul collage card is on the horizon for that, for sure.
Oh, that's such a great image. And that's a beautiful image.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.